I grew up in a cul-de-sac where the asphalt gave up before it reached the trees. In summer, our bikes carved dusty figure eights in the dead end. In winter, the plow left a ribbed wall of snow we tunneled into forts. The adults called it a nice little street, the sort of place where you learn to scrape your own knees and exchange Christmas tints and never lock your doors. But there was always the last lot. Even as a kid, I thought of it that way, not as a yard or a property, but as a vacancy, a final blank square in a crossword no one could fill in. The curb dipped where a driveway should have been. 2 concrete stubs rose from the weeds where mailboxes usually sprouted. The city maps showed a parcel there. Our bus driver swore she'd once dropped off a girl at that address. Mr. Hollister from 3 houses down insisted he'd poured the slab himself back in the 80s, and that a storm took the framing the same night. Every story contradicted the last, which is an adult way of saying we were children and the lot frightened us. When I was 10, my brother Nate bet me a pack of baseball cards that I wouldn't walk across the lot and touch the 2 concrete stubs. He was 13 and already fluent in the language of daring. He could crack his knuckles, and a room would notice him. I was reckless because I wanted to be seen, which is different from bravery, but looks similar on a hot July afternoon. I took 5 steps into the weeds. They scratched my shins and exhaled a papery smell. The rest of the street, grills hissing, someone's radio murmuring, Mrs. Clay yelling for her dog, fell to a hush. Not silence precisely. It was more like the world was listening with me. "Go on," Nate said, hands hooked into the armpits of his sleeveless shirt. "It's nothing." I went 3 steps more. A cicada buzzed and then cut off the way a faucet does when someone finally finds the right angle. The air went thin. I could feel the shape of the curb behind me, like a hand poised to catch my shirt collar if I bolted. It was only concrete. 2 rectangles the size of shoeboxes sunk into the earth. Rebar peered from the broken faces, like old bones. I reached out to touch the near one, and someone coughed behind me. Not Nate. He was ahead of me and to my left. The sound came from where the driveway would have been, if there had been a driveway. It was the raw, unpracticed cough of someone who had forgotten how to cough. I turned around and saw nothing. The weeds lay flat in the shape of a path, their undersides pale and innocent. When I looked back toward the cul-de-sac, no one else was watching. To this day, I wonder if anyone could, once you cross the line of the curb. I touched the concrete stub. It was warm. The cicada started up again, relieved, and sound came back to the street like water to a drained pipe. I ran. Nate laughed and slapped the back of my head in congratulations, but his hand was trembling. That night, he put the baseball cards in the dresser drawer. We pretended it was a safe and locked it with a key from a different lock. We never talked about the empty lot again. Years skim, and the cul-de-sac becomes an address you write on forms, and then finally stop writing. I moved out. So did Nate. Mom stayed in the house with its pink shingles and its hydrangeas the size of beach balls in July. The cul-de-sac got new children, new bikes. But the last lot kept being the last lot, which is to say, it kept being there and not there at once. 10 years passed. Then 11. On the 12th winter, after New Year's, Nate disappeared. He was between jobs and between girlfriends, and had returned to the town like a planet arcing back to its, I don't know, wrong star. He'd taken to walking late at night, looping our childhood streets and texting me comments about the houses, who'd cut down their maple, who'd installed a ghastly string of permanent Christmas bulbs. The last message I have from him is a photograph taken at 3:11 a.m. It shows the end of our old cul-de-sac. The pavement gleams with frost. The weeds of the last lot are bent, as if something large moved through them. There is a smear of light in the upper left corner, and a shadow near the curb that could be a person, or could be the silhouette of nothing at all. Under the photo, he wrote, "It's not empty." Mom called the next day to ask if I'd heard from him. I hadn't. His phone went to voicemail. The police made polite noises and took a report and asked if he'd ever run off before. When I mentioned the last lot, their eyes moved away, which sent a more complicated fear through me than if they'd laughed. 3 days later, an envelope arrived. No stamp, no return address. My name on the front in block letters that didn't pretend to be a stranger's. Inside was a sheet of lined paper torn from a composition notebook, the kind with a syrupy marbled cover. On it were 10 rules written in a cramped and deliberate script I didn't recognize. House rules. End of street. Knock twice on the front door. Wait for the second echo. Enter on your left foot first. Do not use the front staircase. If you hear your name from upstairs, reply with a different name. Do not eat. Do not drink. Do not accept anything. If you pass a mirror, breathe on it. If it fogs, keep going. There are no windows. If you find one, look away. If you see the kitchen clock, do not wind it. If someone asks you what you're doing there, say you're delivering a story. Leave through the door you used to enter. If you can't, finish your story. On the back was a single sentence. Tell it all the way to the end, or it won't let you end. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. It was Nate's tone, even if it wasn't his handwriting. He didn't believe in superstition, but he believed in the way the world sometimes held its breath. He believed in being louder than other people, so that fear would choose a smaller person to feed on. The rules read like everything he'd laughed at, and everything he'd ever been too smart to say out loud. I folded the paper and put it in my jacket pocket and drove to the old street at dusk, because if I waited for full dark, I wouldn't go. And if I went at midday, the house would not be there. I didn't mean to think the word house. It was simply in my head, the way you think the word ocean when you smell salt and something big moving under it. The last lot was not a lot anymore. It was a house that shouldn't have fit there, the way a too tall person tries to fold themselves into a compact car and can't quite make their knees obey. The roofline sagged, not because of rot, but because an idea like gravity had noticed it only recently. The shingles were the muted gray of a word you forgot how to pronounce. The windows, and there were windows, rules be damned, were smoked and reflective in a way that suggested the reflection would not be yours if you looked into them too long. There was a porch with a single step up and a front door that was too narrow for the width of the house. The knob was the round kind no one uses anymore, cold and featureless. I stood with one foot on the step and one foot off it, and tried to remember being 10, and then tried to remember being anything besides the person I was at that moment, which was a person who had walked into fear as if fear were a room and now had to figure out how to turn on the light. Tell it all the way to the end, I said, as if the advice were not insane. The paper in my pocket felt hot. I knocked twice. The first echo came softer than the knocks. The second arrived as a whispering under the porch, as if someone below the boards repeated the sound back to me with their mouth against the foundation. I stepped in on my left foot because I am not a brave person, and I prefer superstition to the absence of rules. The air tasted like dust from a book that had been burned and then put back on a shelf as if nothing had happened to it. I didn't call out. The entryway was narrow and tall, lined with picture frames that contained nothing but the bare wall underneath and a few trapped gnats. Ahead, a corridor yawned. To my right, a room that might have been a parlor opened into murk. To my left, Stairs climbed in a curve like a slice of rib. Do not use the front staircase. I turned my back on it and walked down the corridor. Houses have a sound. They announce their age in the creak of joists and the groan of pipes. This one had the sound you hear when you hold a seashell to your ear, the bounce hush of a tide in a place you cannot see. It took me 20 steps to realize the hush wasn't general. It came from behind each wall, a stereo of quiet. Voices, too, but not words. Not yet. The corridor kinked and widened and became a kitchen. I knew it would. Everyone's haunted idea of a house ends in a kitchen. That's where light lives. That's where hunger does, too. The house would draw a person to the room where people trust themselves the most. The kitchen was very clean. The counters were the unplaceable composite of rental units, too smooth and too new, and somehow already a little tired. A bowl of apples sat on the island. I didn't go nearer. I had no trouble imagining each apple's skin caving where my thumb pressed, as if the fruit had been waiting a very long time for that exact touch. The clock hung on the wall above the sink, an old wind-up with a face like the moon. Its hands pointed nowhere sensible. I looked away before I could check whether it had a key. Do not wind it. "Hello," I said, because the quiet pressed on me, and because fear is a polite person who says hello into rooms. A voice answered from upstairs. It said my name with the intimacy of a nurse in the good part of a hospital. A voice warmed by tea. It used a nickname I haven't heard since my mother stopped remembering that I hated it. I turned a full circle in the kitchen and faced the doorway to the back hall, where the servant stairs would be if the house had ever needed servants. Do not use the front staircase. "Edie," the voice called again. I've never liked that shortened version. My name is Eden, but only on forms. "I'm coming," I said, because my mouth said it for me. I left the kitchen without touching anything and found the narrow back stair. It was steep and close-walled and had a banister worn smooth in the middle, where many hands had learned the friction of going up. As I climbed, the voices in the walls became more distinct. I could hear the breath between words. I smelled winter coats shut away for the summer, cedar and stale cologne, and something else like the singed hair of a candle that has just gone out. On the second-floor landing, a mirror hung beside the first bedroom. Its oval frame was modest, and its glass was old enough to warp along the edges. I stepped close and breathed on it. A petal of fog bloomed where my breath struck, and relief that felt like defeat sank my shoulders. If it fogs, keep going. I wiped the fog away with my sleeve and looked at my face for longer than was reasonable. I do that when I'm afraid, not to admire myself, but to make sure I am still the person I started the moment as. The person in the mirror looked like me, but you would expect that, wouldn't you? She had the paper with the rules in her pocket. She had come to collect her brother, or the part of him that could be collected. Behind her, the hallway went on, a perspective trick that promised more doors than the geometry of the house allowed. "Edie," the voice said again from somewhere to the right, warm and insistent. "In here." "Caroline," I said, absurdly inventing a name. My cheeks burned at the silliness of it. The house did not laugh. Instead, the walls shifted their listening. The hush sloshed. I had the unpleasant sensation that the house had taken the new name down in a ledger. The door to the right was ajar. I pushed it open with 2 fingers. It was a bedroom with a window that looked onto a wall that could not be outside, because I knew the exterior shape of the house, and no wall belonged there. The window had curtains. They lifted in a breeze that came from nowhere. The bed was made with a patient precision. Atop the quilt lay a stack of index cards bound with twine. A note sat on top in that same cramped script. For the story, my hand hovered above the cards before I forced it down. The top card read, "The way the house learns you is by listening to how you end things." The second, "It prefers narratives. If you give it a list, it will turn it into a narrative. If you give it a scream, it will find the beginning and the middle inside your throat. The third, it cannot write its own endings. That is why it is hungry." There were more cards. The stack had a weight to it that my wrist didn't trust. I put the twine back around it and slid the bundle into my jacket because the urge to keep it was stronger than my sense that taking anything was a violation of a rule that should have been on the paper in my pocket. When I turned to leave, someone stood in the doorway. I thought it was Nate. The shape was his height and his posture, the particular way he holds his shoulders, as if he's bracing for someone to pull a chair out from under him, and he wants it to look like a dance step. I said his name, and then I said it again, and took one fast step. The figure did not move like a person. It recalculated. The shoulders went wrong. The arms realized they were attached to a body a half-second too late, the way a sleepwalker realizes the front step is one step lower than your foot believed. The head tilted, and the hair lay across the forehead in a direction hair doesn't know. The smile, when it came, was beautiful and long, and so careful I wanted to apologize for having asked anything of it. "Caroline," it said, and my skin crawled. My mouth opened of its own accord, and a story fell out of me. Not words about my brother, or my fear, or the rules, but a story as simple as a bedtime. "Once," I said, "there was a library at the center of a town, and in that library, there was a book that had been shelved out of order. The librarians took turns putting it back, but each morning the book woke up somewhere else." The figure's smile altered by a degree. Behind it, in the hall, the hush tipped, like a cup in a hand. "Go on," it said. I backed away until my calves touched the bed. I was about to keep going because I was a person who, when prompted politely, would perform an ending to be allowed to leave. But the index cards burned like a brand against my ribs. I heard their words in my head. "It prefers narratives. It is hungry." I closed my mouth, hard enough to bite my tongue. Blood sprayed soft as a strawberry. The figure flinched. The hush in the walls drew back, offended, like people at a party when someone drops a plate and then doesn't apologize. I walked forward. The figure moved to block me. I reached out and touched its shoulder and felt. My breath left me. The give of meat. Not cold. Not hot. Not the rubber of a dream. It was real as a person is real, and wrong as a person is not. "Where's my brother?" I asked, and the figure's smile widened by another careful degree. "Deliver your story," it said gently, as if the matter were already agreed upon. "Then we'll talk." I shoved. It stumbled, or performed stumbling, and I slipped past and back into the hall. The hush rose not to a roar, but to a thicker hush, packed with syllables just shy of language. I took the servant stairs down 2 at a time. Something followed, not footsteps. The act of following. In the kitchen, the wind-up clock's second hand was rewriting the same inch of time over and over, as if carving a tally. The apples in the bowl were not apples, but perfect facsimiles made of something like wax that had remembered what juice was and was crying. The front hall waited ahead. The front door waited at the end of it. The front staircase curved down into my path. I kept to the hallway side, shoulder-scraping plaster, and ran for the door. It did not open. Of course it didn't. Rule 10 sits in your pocket like a scorpion. Leave through the door you used to enter. If you can't, finish your story. The servant stair waited behind me. The kitchen clock ticked its failure tick. The hush balanced on my eardrums like a doctor's instrument. I did not go upstairs. I did not wind the clock. I did not eat an apple. I took the index cards out of my jacket and spread them on the floor, a little reluctant confession of theft. The hush leaned. There were maybe 100. Some held instructions. If you wake in the house, go back to sleep. It knows why it called you. It's kinder that way. Some were warnings. The house is the end of something. Do not bring it to your beginning. Most were scraps of stories. Endings, mostly. Tight, unadorned closures like you find in fairy tales. And then the door opened, and she saw that it had been her father all along, but he was younger than she was. And the town burned 2 times, once to make it safe, and once to make it true. And he lay down because he was tired, and he discovered he had been lying down the whole time, and the field had been the ceiling of a room. The house loved these. I could feel it. They were candy on the tongue to it. I didn't have a story. I had a brother-shaped hole and a set of rules, and the certainty that if I ended anything, the house would end me with it. I'm not delivering anything, I said aloud, which is what you say when you are, and want someone to insist in a way that absolves you. I'm here for Nate. He left me the rules. The hush flowed over my name like oil over water. It didn't like names, or perhaps it liked them too much. As I thought that, I realized the hush was trying new names out. It was practicing the sound of me. I gathered the cards and shoved them back into my pocket. The paper with the rules was there too, soft with wear now, as if it had always lived against my hip. I read them again, not because I had forgotten them, but because reading is a way of making yourself belong to an outcome where you might survive. Then I went looking for the back door. There was one, of course, off the kitchen, behind a short wall of wainscoting. It had a brass bolt. When I slid the bolt, it made a noise like someone exhaling in relief. I pulled. The door opened onto hallway, not outside. The hallway sloped down into a kind of garden of shadows, where I think a rec room might be in a normal house. Fine, I said to the air. I'll tell you a story. The hush became very still. It's a story you already know, I went on, because it's about you. You can't threaten a house, especially not one that's listening, but you can lie to it. You can lie in the right direction so that the lie becomes a road. I started walking into the hall that wasn't outdoors and told the house about the house. Once upon a time, I said, there was a place that could not stand endings. Not because they upset it, but because it loved them too much. People left scraps of endings everywhere, on their plates, in their laundry, in the way they said goodnight, and meant 4 different kinds of goodnight at once. And the place ate those endings and became very strong. I passed a laundry room that smelled like tide pools. The washer door was a porthole, and behind it, not water. Moving. Pressing. Every time someone told a story, I said, the place leaned closer to hear how the story would end. The place learned that it could make people unhappy in very specific ways in order to hurry the ending up. For instance, it could move a wall, or erase a path, or appear in a space that used to be empty. It learned to be a house because houses heard endings. Houses collect the end of the day, the end of the meal, the end of a marriage, the end of a life. It learned to be the last thing. The hallway opened into a room that tried to be a den, but was a den like a painting of a den is, which is to say, it had the items in the proper places, but none of the shame or clutter. On the coffee table sat a tape recorder, actual cassettes. A cassette was inside. On a paper beside it was written, "Press play to continue." Absolutely not, I told the room. But I pressed play because we all want to be told what to do by the very thing that should not tell us. Nate's voice came into the room. Not his now voice. His voice at 19, thinner and full of daring. "If you're here," it said, "you found the rules. I didn't write them. Someone left them for me. Maybe you. Maybe we keep handing them backward to each other. I've been here longer than I should. The house made me finish things I didn't know I'd started. I tried to leave when I was halfway through, but halfway through is another way to say inside, and inside is another way to say, not yet." I stood so still the tape hissed around the room like weather. "The house wants an end," Nate said, "but not just any end. It wants the kind you think about later at the sink. It wants an ending that tells it what came before. It can't do the math unless you give it the answer first. I can make an ending for it. I can make 100 endings. But none of them are the right one, because the right one..." Silence. Then the tinny click of a stop button and the soft whir of the cassette backing. On the paper beneath the tape recorder, in a hand I recognize now as Nate's, someone had added, "It has to be true. Not factual. True." "I don't have your truth," I told the room. "I have mine." I kept walking. The hall brought me to a set of French doors that should have opened onto the backyard of the lot that used to be a lot. They opened onto the foyer. This time, the front door was gone. The oval mirror hung where it had been, but its glass was water now. Not moving, but thirsty. The house was annoyed. I could feel it the way you can feel a room you offended by being funny at the wrong time. "Listen," I said, and for a moment I meant it as an apology. Then I heard how the word sounded here and hated it. "Fine. I'll give you an ending." I told it the simplest one I had, the one I have always used when I can't breathe. "A girl went into a house to find her brother," I said. "She told herself she could leave whenever she wanted. She discovered that wasn't true, so she made a rule for herself. If you can't leave, make the leaving happen somewhere else." The hush stilled. The mirror held its breath. "What does that mean?" a voice asked from the wall. Not the warm voice, not the careful one. This was a new register I hadn't heard in the house, curious and a little insulted. "It means," I told it, "you're not the end of the street. You're just where the street forgets what it's for." Silence. Then the shiver of laughter in the boards. Not scorn, not amusement. A housekeeping chuckle. Someone pleased to discover a stain that will come out after all. "You think you can move the end," the house said. And for the first time, the voice did not come from above or below or nowhere. It came from a precise section of the wall at the level of my shoulder. I could have pressed my hand to the plaster and felt its breath if houses had breath. "I think endings are where people agree to stop," I said, shaking. "You don't get to decide that for us." Another laugh. "Then end this," it said. "End your brother. End the you that is in here. Let's see if your agreement reaches that far." The mirror's surface bulged. A shape moved in it, like a person trying to come up from under a lake. I did not look at myself. I have heard enough stories. I took the index cards out again. I threw them into the mirror. The glass accepted them greedily. They vanished without a ripple. "That's not an ending," the house said, chiding. "That's a tantrum." "It's a return," I said. "You can't keep what you stole if I won't claim it." It thought about that, or pretended to. The hush withdrew to a polite distance. I seized the moment and kept talking, the way you talk when you know you are ash on the wind, and the only thing that gives you shape is your own voice. "Here is my ending," I said. "A woman tells a house a story that the house cannot eat because the story does not belong to her alone. It belongs to everyone who hears it. The woman says the house is only the shape that hunger takes when it wants to be polite. The woman walks to the front of the house and puts her hand on where the doorknob should be and says, "I'm done." And the people listening, whoever they are, wherever they are, say, "We're done too." And that makes an outside that the house cannot fold. The house did not like that at all. The hush surged. The floor bucked so subtly I only knew because the mirror water sloshed. In that slosh, reflected, I saw a figure at the top of the front staircase. It was the shape from the bedroom door. It was Nate, if you took his name away and left only the outline his name had once filled. I looked away. "Edie," the not Nate said gently, in a voice that understood how to hold someone and put them down in the same syllable. "Finish something for me." "Caroline," I said, and the ledger in the wall paused its scratching. "I'm finishing this." I put my hand where the doorknob wasn't, because belief is as good as hardware when a house is made of appetite. I said, "I'm done." And out loud, I finished the story. And then she walked out. The door opened. Cold air hit my face, hard and indifferent. Behind me, the hush made a sound like a sigh poured backward through teeth. I did not look back. I stepped onto the porch and down onto the lawn and ran until the cul-de-sac was behind me, and the regular world began again with its ordinary cruelty of traffic and someone's sprinklers turning on too early in the season. At the car, I turned and looked. The last lot was a vacant lot. 2 concrete stubs sat in the weeds, gray as chewed gum. My hands shook on the steering wheel so badly, the horn chirped like a frightened bird. At home, I unfolded the piece of paper with the rules. The margin had a note in Nate's hand I hadn't seen before, maybe because it wasn't there before. Maybe because I hadn't been the person yet who could see it. It said, "Don't come back. I mean it." Underneath, smaller, "If you have to, bring everyone." And then, an even smaller line than that, almost a scratch, "Finish it loud." I didn't go back. I told myself virtue had something to do with it. It didn't. The house had taught me a new category of fear, and the world had room enough for it without my needing to demonstrate aptitude. I called the police again. I told them the last lot was empty. They made a note somewhere that will never be read and suggested grief counseling. I called Mom and explained that Nate was traveling somewhere without cell service, with the sort of lies you tell a person whose brain will not reward your honesty. At night, I woke because a clock I didn't own was whirring down and not catching. When I walked through my apartment to find it, there was no clock. There was only the hush in the pipes you get when a neighbor flushes at the same time as the building's size. I stood in the hallway and listened to the hush listening back. A week later, a square package arrived by courier. Inside was a shoebox, like the one in the dresser we used to call a safe. Inside the shoebox were tapes, old cassettes with clear bodies, and the remains of price tags clinging to them like scabs. Each cassette had a date in black Sharpie and a title, "The Door at the End." Why the Apples Don't Bruise. Kitchen Clock. Don't. Mirror. Fog. One had only my name. I don't own a cassette player. You can buy one, obviously. You can also drive to your childhood home and break into the attic and sift the boxes and find the one with the tape recorder Mom used for Christmas plays. I did the second, because buying a new player felt like surrender. And anyway, I knew exactly which attic box would smell like mouse and paste and contain the recorder with the red plastic mic button you had to hold down. I listened to the tape with my name last. The others were the sound of a person trying to push a story up a hill while the hill tilted away. Sometimes the voice was Nate's, sometimes it wasn't. In one, someone wept while the clock ticked, and then became laughter without the part in the middle where you understand why the weeping changed. On my tape, Nate's voice was close to the mic. "If you have this," he said softly, "it means two things. You went in. I'm sorry. And you got out. Good. I need you to do one more thing." "Absolutely not," I said aloud in the attic dust. "Tell it," he said. "Tell it and keep telling it. Tell it to people who will hear the ending in their heads before you get there, and then say a different ending so they have to make a second one. Make the ending too big for it to eat at once. I tried to make small endings it could swallow because I thought small meant safe. It doesn't. Small just means easy." He breathed. The tape caught the soft click of his tongue as he reached for the next sentence. "It knows me now," he said. "It knows my endings. It made rooms out of them. It made stairs. It made mirrors. It made a kitchen because I said kitchen as if kitchens were the only way to be warm. I should have said field. I should have said sky. I'm sorry." The recorder knocked against the table. Paper rustled. "If you read the rules, you saw the last line," he went on. "Finish your story. I think that's the only way anyone leaves with their name. Maybe not even then. But if you tell it loud enough, if you get a street to say it with you." The tape ended there. Maybe he hadn't finished the thought. Maybe that was the thought. I didn't sleep for 2 nights because the house is not a building you leave simply by going outside. It is a habit. It is a way of cupping your hand around an ending and making it tidy. Every time I turned off the light, I thought I heard the front staircase curve down inside my wall. Every time I opened the fridge, I imagined the apples. I considered throwing away the tapes and the rules and the recorder. Then I thought of the line he had written, "If you have to, bring everyone." So I started telling this, not just to you, but to anyone who would tolerate me. I told it over coffee to coworkers who like podcasts about murders. I told it to the woman at the DMV who asked where I'd been because my license expired. I told it to an empty room and into my phone and into the mirror, which fogged every time. You can say this is grief. You can say this is the way human beings make doors where there are none. You can say, correctly, that if you believe in a house, you will furnish it with exactly the furniture it needs. I agree with you. I am furnishing it with speech it can't digest. I am making every ending I can think of and laying them on the curb the way you leave stuff out with a free sign and watch people slow down and consider and then pull away because they cannot use any of it after all. A month after the tapes came, I went back to the cul-de-sac. It was daytime, and the street was a street. Someone had painted their front door a color between teal and dare me. A teenager practiced a skateboard trick that would break his foot if he landed it wrong. Mrs. Clay's dog had been replaced by a similar dog with a newer face. The last lot was weeds, and 2 concrete stubs, and the smell of paper. The air did the listening thing when I stepped across the curb, but there was no cough. I touched the concrete again. It was warm for a different reason. Sun. On the way back to the car, a girl of maybe 8 stood beside her bike and asked, "Does someone live there?" "No," I said out of reflex. Then, because reflex is another name for fear, "Sometimes." She nodded as if that made sense, as if she had a life ahead of her that would always be this sensical. My dad says it's where the street ends. But streets don't end. They just turn into other streets. Your dad is right, I said, and meant it more than she knew. That night I dreamed I was knocking on a door that used to be a mirror, and the person who opened it was Nate at 19, and Nate at 35, and a figure entirely made of careful smiles. In the dream, I didn't speak. I handed them this story like a folded sweater, and they took it with both hands, and I woke with my palms stinging as if I'd carried something heavy. I don't have a good ending for you. That's honest. And honesty is not always the same as truth, but it is neighbor to it. The best I can do is the ending the house hates. You decide. If you need the version with a bowed ribbon, here it is. I never saw my brother again, except in the way you see people in other people's words. The house is a place and not a place. It sits at the end of streets that have forgotten what ends are for. It likes to eat the last bite. It will offer you a fork. It will offer to cut your food for you. If you go in, you will come out only when you finish something it can't finish for you. But there's another ending, the one I prefer, because the house cannot hold it. It goes like this. The story kept going. I kept telling it. You heard it. You are hearing it now, and you are making your own end for it in your head. Something I can't foresee, because your endings aren't mine. Maybe you'll imagine a door that opens when you say you're done. Maybe you'll imagine a window that is not a window. Maybe you'll imagine a kitchen clock that, when you wind it, counts forward from now instead of backward from then. Whatever you imagine, do it loudly. Say it out loud even if you are alone in your car. The house can listen. That is its power. But we can chorus. That is ours. If tonight you walk to the end of your street and something is where nothing was yesterday, do not knock. Or do, if you're the sort who has always needed to touch the warm concrete to believe yourself. Either way, carry this with you, like rules in your pocket, softened by your hands. Knock twice and wait for the second echo, only if you want to hear what is listening. Step with whichever foot belongs to the person you are, not the one it wants. Stairs are stories. Choose yours. If it calls you by your name, give it a wrong one. Save the right one for people. Eat later. Drink outside. Fog means you are still here. There are no windows, only pictures of outsides you haven't agreed to yet. Let the clocks run down. Time is not a leash. If anyone asks why you're there, say you're delivering a story, and then hand them this one, and let them decide what to do with the end. If you can't leave through the door you entered, make a new exit out of everyone listening. Tell it all the way to the end, or it won't let you end. I think that's true, but I also think endings are less a place than a vote. I am voting now. So are you. Look, can you hear it? The hush pulling back, embarrassed, as if we have caught it arranging the furniture for guests, and we were all the guests at once. When I drive past my old street now, I don't stop. The cul-de-sac lifts and falls in the rear view. The last lot is a smudge of weeds. Somewhere, the house is listening for an ending that tastes like me, the way you listen for your favorite part of a song from a passing car. It will not get it. Not because I am strong, because I am loud, because I have learned to hand my endings out like candy at Halloween, because I don't knock anymore unless I want a chorus at my back. Maybe one night you'll pull your curtains and see a shape where a window wasn't. Maybe you'll hear your name from upstairs. You'll know what to say. Try Caroline. Try any name that isn't yours. Then try your story. Your messy, too big ending the house can't swallow in one bite. And if you hear a cough from where a driveway should be, don't be afraid. Or do. Fear is polite. It says hello into rooms. Say hello back. Say it twice. Wait for the second echo. Then keep talking.